In 1957, Russia launched Sputnik. A year later, the United States created NASA, and 11 years later, we finally put a man on the moon. Now, this is for most of us, ancient history. It was a few years before I was born. And we don't quite get the grasp sometimes of how incredible an act that was. But if many of you here saw it, you understood how that almost seemed like the pinnacle of what we as human beings could accomplish. And how did we get there? Did we get to the moon overnight? No. It took a lot of work. First, we had to figure out how to get high enough in the sky, past the 50-mile mark. Then there was Project Mercury, where we sent a man around the world. Then there was Project Gemini, where we had to ask the question, okay, now that we can send a man to the world, around the world, can we dock two spacecrafts? Can we have an EVA, which is a spacewalk? Can we do this again? Can this be something that we do frequently? And then finally, with Project Apollo, we put 3 men on top of a Saturn V rocket and shot them around the moon, and then finally on the moon. To get to the moon, we as the United States had to work really hard. And then we had to take the little tasks that at first seemed too difficult, putting someone on top of the rocket and sending them out of space, and make that seem easy. And then the next task, getting them around the world. We had to do it and then make it seem easy. And then finally, after task, the impossible became the impossible. Because what used to be difficult became, if not easy, easier, and part of the very fabric of who NASA was. Now, this is the same process that we have with virtue. Each one of us sees the saints' lives and we think, I couldn't do that. That's like going to the moon. That person resisted that temptation? Impossible. That person was that kind or that generous or was that loving of poverty? I couldn't do that. But just like we didn't go to the moon overnight, so did these saints not become saints overnight. They committed themselves to growth and virtue, and then they fought the little battles, one after another, so that the first battle, maybe being kind to their brother or sister, which seemed way too hard, became possible. And then finally, what seemed impossible became reality in their lives. There are 4 main virtues. And if you are aware of what season we're in now, Advent, you'll notice there are 4 weekends in Advent. So this gives Father Ashmore a chance to talk about all 4 virtues. We're going to be talking about, in my homilies over the next 4 weeks, the 4 cardinal virtues. And these are the virtues into which all other virtues fit. They're called the cardinal virtues because it comes from the Latin word cardo, which means hinge. All other virtues, such as patience and chastity and all the other virtues, fit within all of these 4. And what are the 4 cardinal virtues? Prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. We'll talk about temperance next week, justice the week after, and fortitude the week after that. But today we'll talk about prudence. What is prudence? Well, first of all, it has nothing to do with the word prude. A prudent person is not a prude, nor does it have to do anything with the Beatles song, Dear Prudence. No. Prudence has to do with using our mind to direct our actions to the true good of the human person. So the prudent person first understands what it means to be human. And we as human beings are not meant for merely earthly realities. I'm sure that you like pie, I like ice cream. These other fleshly things are good, but that's not why we're created. We're not created in order to only eat pie. We're created to see God. And so the prudent person sees what the meaning of life truly is, first of all. and then says, I'm created for more. And so I'm going to do everything in my life to be able to achieve that which is more and not less. So prudence doesn't, first of all, have to do with choosing between good and bad. That's a normal part of the moral life. You're not a prudent person because you avoid sin. That's a good thing, but it's not prudence. Prudence is looking at different things that are good and figuring out which one is better, which one is the best. So, how do we become prudent? Well, there are 3 parts of prudence. The first one is counsel. If you want to grow in prudence, you get the counsel of others. You go to the church, you read the catechism, you ask somebody who's wiser than you are. You don't grow in prudence on your own. It demands, because we are finite creatures who need to learn, who don't always have the right answers, it demands that we ask others and we learn. So that's the first step of prudence. Asking others what we should do in situations so that we can do what's best. The second one is judgment. We judge a particular action, a particular circumstance, and we see all the different various options. We see some that are evil, we see some that are okay, and we see some that are great. And we judge which ones are which. Now, if we don't have good counsel, we can't make a good judgment in that way. But once we have good counsel, we make a good judgment, and we see which is the best option, which one brings us to the fulfillment of who we are, and not merely something lower. Which one brings us to God? And the third part is action. The prudent person doesn't only know what the right path is, but they're able to choose it, and they're able to do it. Those are the 3 parts of prudence. It may seem like a basic virtue, like, okay, Father, that's pretty simple. But it helps us to discover every other virtue. Because, as the Catechism calls it, it's a charioteer of the virtues. When it comes into battle, it brings all of its friends with it. Because you judge all the other virtues. You judge what temperance is, according to how prudent that decision is. You judge what is just, according to how prudent it is. So, the first cardinal virtue is the most important because it is the foundation of all the other ones. We can think of it as being like the air in your tire. You have your tire, and for the tire to be able to go, it needs to be blown up. And prudence is the air in the tire. It makes everything else go. Now, you may say, okay, Father, that's great, but what does that have to do with the readings? I'll tell you. We see in the gospel today, Jesus say, be watchful, be alert. May he not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to all, watch. This is the job of the prudent person. Because the prudent person realizes that the master could come at any point. And so he doesn't want to be found merely doing what's okay, just sitting back and relaxing. He wants to be found working for the master in everything he does. The prudent man, the prudent woman is the one who realizes that their whole life is oriented towards Jesus. And so they sit down and they watch. Watch for Jesus in everything. Choose every decision to bring them to Jesus. And then act upon those decisions. So we will soon discover what the other 3 virtues are: temperance, justice, and fortitude. But today our task is to grow in prudence. Ask our Lord to fill us with that prudence and give us that strength to really see what our end is. See that we're made to go to the moon. See that we're made to be great saints and not settle for mediocrity, because we're made for so much more than mediocrity. We're made to see God's face, and prudence is our way of getting there.